Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome to a video that I've been so excited to get to for a very long time. Today I'm going to be updating my tier list. Last time I did this was after episode 25 of Journey into Legends, and at that time I chose to only include the books. This time around I am going to be going back, re-ranking each and every book and comic that I've ever reviewed on the channel from episode 1 all the way to episode 50. So without further ado, let's rank and review. So before we get into this, I'm going to quickly go through each tier and what they mean. Let's start in the very middle with the C tier, which is for books or comics that are completely average, basically ones that I don't necessarily have a positive or negative opinion on. Above and below that, we have the B and D tiers, which are for books and comics that I think are above or below average, respectively. D tier is for things I think aren't very good, but not horrible, and the B tier are for things that I enjoyed, but that I think aren't too great. The A and E tiers are for things that are really good and really bad, respectively. Then the S tier is for the best of the best, the closest thing that Star Wars can have to a masterpiece, and the F tier is for the worst of the worst, things so bad I'd never reread them in a million years. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's jump into the first book. So first we have Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster. Last time I ranked this book on the tier list, I gave this book a little bit of slack because of when it came out. It came out in 1976. All Alan Dean Foster had as a reference was A New Hope. So I decided to give it a pass for some of its flaws because, of course, Alan Dean Foster couldn't help that. George Lucas made some changes later on, but this time around, I've just decided that the only criteria that I'm going to be basing this off of is how much I enjoyed the book or the comic that I'm talking about. So this book, last time I gave it a pass for a lot of its flaws and for how dated it is. This time around, I'm just gonna say it how it is. It's not great, and it's very dated. Luke and Leia's romance in this book is very hard to read, of course, because of later changes to the franchise. Vader, they have a duel with him, which takes place before Empire Strikes Back. I don't like that idea at all. And they beat Vader, which I really don't like. So it's just a very dated book overall, and it just doesn't hold up to today's standards. But based on its own, it's also just it's just an adventure story, and not a great one at that. The plotline is just kind of a poorly done MacGuffin plotline, and the characters, new and old, are pretty uninteresting and really nothing special. So overall, this book, for the time, it's good, but again, just based on my enjoyment of it, I'm going to put this book in the D tier. Next, we have the Marvel Comics. Overall, I really enjoyed this series. I thought they were a lot of fun. I personally really enjoyed how campy and cheesy and just overall nonsensical these could be. I had a lot of fun with that. The thing that holds these comics back, though, is individual issues. There's a lot of really good issues, a lot of really memorable and fun ones, but for every really good and memorable and fun and interesting issue, there's an equally boring and forgettable and bad issue. So it's a very balanced series. There's a lot of good, a lot of bad, a lot of mediocre. So I'm going to put this in the C tier. Overall, as a series, I think I got a lot of enjoyment out of it, but when you look at each individual issue, it starts to balance out. So I'm going to put it in the C tier, right smack dab in the middle. I think that's just the perfect place for it. Next, we have Han Solo at Star's End by Brian Daley. This book was such a super fun adventure. It's very refreshing to read a story that isn't about Jedi and Sith, or even about the Empire and the Rebellion. This book is just strictly about smugglers and scoundrels and bounty hunters and, the Outer Rim. It explores the dirt and the grime of the Star Wars universe, the underworld. It's really refreshing. It's a breath of fresh air, and I really had a lot of fun with it. The characters are a lot of fun. Han and Chewie are just... their characterization is just spot on. It's a perfect portrayal of A New Hope version of the characters. And then the new characters as well, Bollocks and Blue Max specifically, were a lot of fun. So overall, I don't know, I just had so much fun with this book. It's a very easy book to just kick back and read and have a great time with. Very simplistic story, very fun characters, very fun plot. So, yeah, it's honestly one of the more fun books that I've read. So I'm going to put it in the B tier. It's not a masterpiece. It's not, high literature or anything, but it was a lot of fun. So, yeah. Next is the second book in Brian Daley's trilogy, Han Solo's Revenge. Personally, this was my least favorite of the trilogy. It's still fun, Han and Chewie are still, their characterization's still pretty spot on. Bollocks and Blue Max are still fun. We get Galandro as a villain introduced in this. He's a cool character. But other than that, it's a pretty forgettable book. The plot is a lot less fun. There's a plot twist. It's a central part of the plot here, and it takes way too long to actually reveal itself, so a lot of the time you're just kind of wondering what exactly is going on, and by the time the plot twist comes around, you've forgotten some of the details of the story, so it kind of falls apart on first read-through. And the whole plot line is about slavery and this whole slave ring, which there's a lot of potential with that, but I feel like it was a big missed opportunity. They could have explored Han and Chewie, their backstory with Chewie being a slave, and they could have done a lot of foreshadowing of Han and Chewie becoming heroes in the original trilogy, and they didn't really do that much, so kind of a missed opportunity in terms of that storyline. So I'm going to put this in the C tier, below the Marvel Comics, just because I think the Marvel Comics were a little bit more memorable and a little bit more fun and energetic, this one being a little bit more boring and forgettable. Han Solo and the Lost Legacy is the final book of the trilogy. I really enjoyed this one. This was my personal favorite of the trilogy. I really liked how the plot was very localized on the planet of Dalalt. The other two books, Han and Chewie are, going from planet to planet. Their journey takes them across the galaxy. This one, I think they visit a few planets at the beginning, but once they get to the planet of Dalalt, they spend the rest of the book there. Their whole adventure takes place on that planet, which I really liked. I thought it was a pretty cool, pretty cool adventure. Learning a lot about Dalalt and going to all these different locations. The lake, the mountains, the city, the mines, the vault. Really cool stuff. Again, the characters are great. Han, Chewie, Bollocks, Blue Max, Galandro. The little cast of characters that Brian Daley built around Han and Chewie was really fun. Hasty is kind of a love interest. Badura is an old smuggler friend of Han's. Skinks is like this little rodent, or not a rodent, but like a insect creature. He's like a historian. He was really cool. And yeah, overall it's just a really fun story. It's a really well structured book. It's got great action, especially near the end. They go into the vault and Galandro dies, and they have a big battle with all the war droids of Zim the Despots, and it's a really fun book, so I'm going to put it in the B tier above Star's End. Again, this is my favorite of the trilogy, so yeah, I just really enjoyed it. Next, we have the first book of the Lando Calrissian Adventures trilogy by L. Neil Smith. This is Lando Calrissian and the Mindharp of Sharu. These books are a lot weirder than Han Solo's books, which I really like. I really like the weird corners of the Star Wars galaxy. It's either really good or really bad, and in this case, I thought it was really, really well done. These books feel like an acid trip. They don't even feel like real events in the Star Wars universe. It's really cool. I do have to say that a lot of this book was boring. It's just Lando and Vufi Ra kind of going between planets, doing some forgettable things. But once they go into this big pyramid, which warps space and time, that was really awesome. I really enjoyed that part of the book. This book had really good characters. I thought Lando was pretty decent. His characterization was really good. Vufi Ra, his droid, was awesome. I love Vufi Ra. He was great in these books, and his introduction was great in this book. And Roker Gepta, who is the villain of this trilogy, his introduction in this book, he's not great, but he is very unique. It was a very weird and unique decision to make a sorcerer the main villain, but I think it paid off really well. I like him. So overall, it's a decent book. It's pretty boring, but I do really like how weird it gets, and I like the risks that L. Neil Smith took. So I'm going to put it in the C tier. I'll put it above the Marvel comics just because I do have some nostalgia for it, and I did enjoy it a decent amount. So, yeah. Next, we have Lando Calrissian and the Flamewind of Oseon, the second book in the trilogy. This is my least favorite of the trilogy. It's the least weird of the book, or of the trilogy, which, again, I really like the weirdness of this trilogy, and this book just doesn't lean as heavily into it, which is a shame. I do have some, flaws with it, some problems with it that are kind of objective. First of all, the plot takes way too long to kick into gear. It felt like the first, 50 pages of this book were just Lando and Vufi Ra kind of flying around the galaxy doing nothing. They had no objective. Also, that part of the book was kind of told in a non-linear way, so it was kind of hard to follow at times. And then when the plot finally did kick into gear, the whole plot revolved around Roker Gepta trying to get revenge on Lando for the events of the last book, but that whole plot didn't really make a ton of sense because in the last book it wasn't really Lando's fault that Roker Gepta's evil plan failed. Lando really didn't have much to do with that, so it kind of fell apart for me. So overall, this book, the plot just dragged it down, and again, it was less weird, so I didn't enjoy it as much. I'll put it in the C tier. I think it's still above Han's Revenge, just because it is a little bit more memorable and it is a little bit more fun. But again, it's my least favorite of the trilogy. Then we have Lando Calrissian in the Starcave of ThonBoka. This is my favorite of the trilogy. I just think it has the best plot, the best structure, a lot of really good ideas in here. Again, this book is really weird. It gets a lot weirder again, unlike the last book. I really liked the Oswaft as a species. There are these, hyperspace manta rays that Lando meets and becomes friends with. That was really cool. Roker Gepta kind of comes into his own and becomes a really cool villain in this book, as he teams up with another villain from the last book named Klin Shanga. We get some backstory for Vufi Ra, which was really great, and Lando's great in this book. Overall, great book, and my favorite of the trilogy. I'll put it in the B tier above Star's End, I'll put it below Star's End. I did really like it, but I do have more nostalgia for Star's End. So yeah. Next is the Jedi Prince series. I'm going to be condensing all the young adult series into a single entry on the list. Jedi Prince as a series, it's just really weird and nonsensical. I mean, it's basically the holiday special of Star Wars literature. It's not meant to be taken seriously at this point. It's barely even canon. It's just really weird. A lot of really weird ideas. Trioculus, the Glove of Darth Vader, Zorba the Hutt, just really weird stuff. Ken Palpatine, the Lost City of the Jedi, just really dumb stuff all throughout. Ironically, it's kind of fun to read, but I'm going to put it in the F tier. It's just not something I really want to go back and read ever again. Thank God it's not essential reading, because it's pretty bad. Objectively and subjectively, I just don't really like it too much, so I'll put it in the F tier. I mean, the F tier's gotta be filled with something, and Jedi Prince is, it's F tier material, so sorry to all you Jedi Prince fans, but just being honest. Next we have Dark Empire. This is pretty controversial entry, of course. Conceptually, I don't like Dark Empire at all. I think Palpatine returning after Return of the Jedi is a really dumb idea. I don't think it ruins the saga, but I definitely think it cheapens Anakin's sacrifice. So I don't like that. I just think it'd be better if it didn't exist at all. Luke turning to the dark side, even if it is a ploy to take down Palpatine from the inside, I don't care. I just don't really like that storyline. Execution-wise, I do like Dark Empire. I think it is pretty campy and pretty fun. There's some 90s cheese in there. The art is really fun. I mean, the art is very stylized, so you either love it or you hate it. Personally, I love it, but I just can't get behind the Palpatine return and the Luke dark side and everything. I don't know. I'll just put it in the C tier. I'll put it above Flamewind of Oseon. At least it's conceptually flawed, but I think it is objectively executed fairly well. And it is a decently fun read, so yeah. Then we have Dark Empire 2, which is completely unnecessary. It shouldn't have been made. I don't know, Dark Empire 1 by itself was good enough, but besides that, just based on itself, there was a lot more focus on the smugglers and Han and Lando and everything to do with Nar Shaddaa and the New Republic's war against the Dark Empire, instead of the Force stuff with Palpatine and Luke and all that, and the Abyss and the clones and everything, which makes it less interesting to me. It's the fact that it's kind of boring and very unnecessary. I'm going to put it in the D tier. I'll put it below Splinter of the Mind's Eye, just because I imagine myself, going back and rereading Splinter of the Mind's Eye. I'd be a lot more open to doing that than rereading Dark Empire 2, personally. So, yeah, Dark Empire 2, at the time, I enjoyed it more than Dark Empire 1, but as time has gone on, I definitely have, soured on it a lot, mainly because it's just so unnecessary. It doesn't even have to exist. So, yeah. Same with Empire's End. It's very unnecessary. Of course, all the behind-the-scenes drama involving this one really ruined it. It's 2 issues instead of 6, so the ending is just completely rushed. The art is very bad because Cam Kennedy is no longer involved. The writing is bad. Han Solo kills Palpatine at the end, for example. It's just really, really dumb. It'd be a lot more offensive if I actually really liked Dark Empire 1 and 2, but because I don't like Dark Empire 1 and 2, luckily that kind of saves Empire's End from being an utter disappointment. Still, it does suck, and I'm going to put it in the E tier. I don't think it's absolutely atrocious and offensive like something like Jedi Prince, but it is a very lackluster and lazy finale to the trilogy. So, E tier is perfect, I think. Next, we have Heir to the Empire, the first book of the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn, of course. Just completely ignoring the fact that this book is just completely revolutionary and revived Star Wars. Just based on my enjoyment, I think this book is just brilliant. It's the perfect mix of new and old and, familiar and everything. It's the perfect mix of complexity and simplicity, the way that the plot is very intelligently written, but it's also very easy to follow. There's a lot of brilliant new characters. The old characters are, their characterization is spot on, but the new characters are the standout. We have Thrawn, Mara Jade, Captain Paleon, Juro Sabayoth, Talon Card, Rook, just so many characters that are just, they go on to live throughout many series. They're icons. Everybody knows who Mara Jade and Thrawn are, even those who haven't read the books. It's crazy the cultural impact these characters have had just from this little book here. Again, the plot is great. It's very grand. It feels like another movie. Of course, this is a lot of people's episode 7, and I totally get that. It's just such a fun book to read. I feel like you just read chapter 1 and it just pulls you in and it never really lets go. It just entices you and it intrigues you and it keeps you entertained throughout the whole thing. And I just really, really loved it. I don't think it's a masterpiece. It is a little bit dated in its handling of the whole sci-fi genre. And the way it's written, the prose is not very, but a little dated. But other than that, it is a very, very good book. I'll put it in the A tier. I doubt anything's actually going to make it into the S tier this video. I'm saving that for just the absolute best of the best. again, just the closest thing that Star Wars can get to a masterpiece. Things like the Revenge of the Sith novelization, I imagine we'll get in there. So, not S tier today, but A tier is nothing to be ashamed of. So, Heir to the Empire, A tier, I'm fine with it. Next we have Dark Force Rising. Again, the middle book of the trilogy is my least favorite. It's a little bit of a trend so far. In this case, Dark Force Rising is my least favorite because it is the middle book in the trilogy. I feel like it just doesn't stand on its own 2 feet as well as the other 2 books of the trilogy. It doesn't stand on its own as well. It spends too much time taking what Heir to the Empire set up and continuing that and setting up things to come in The Last Command. Now, I do like everything in this book, basically. I like all the storylines. I like Leia on Honoghr. I like Luke visiting, Jeru Sabaoth. I like Han and Lando's search for the Dark Force for the Katana fleet. I like Niles Ferrier. I like Garmbel Iblis. I like the Delta Source. The plot, the way it's structured, is very multifaceted and complex and well-written and intelligently structured. It's a very well-written book. But again, it just doesn't stand up to the other 2, in my opinion. It doesn't stand on its own as well. So, I'll still put it in the A tier. I think it's still a Timothy Zahn Thrawn book, so it's still going to be a fantastic read, but it isn't as fun as Heir to the Empire, and it isn't as satisfying as The Last Command. Speaking of The Last Command, let's move on to that. It's the 3rd book in the trilogy, of course, and it is just such a phenomenal conclusion to the trilogy. Yes, technically, it's not really fair to other books because this book has 2 books of setup, and the way that it concludes an entire 3-book cycle is what makes it so brilliant and so fun to read. But I don't care. I mean, that's why this book is so fun, is because of the way it concludes the trilogy. I mean, it stuck the landing. You got to commend it for that. It's very hard to stick the landing. I'd say the 3rd act is the hardest thing to get right in terms of a 3-act story, and Timothy Zahn knocked it out of the park. This book just takes all the plot lines from all 3 books, and it just wraps it all up real nicely. The Smuggler's Alliance plotline, the Thrawn campaign plotline, the Mara and Luke stuff, even the Leia Honoghr stuff from the last book gets paid off in this book in a really satisfying way. It's just very, very satisfying, and it really caps off the trilogy nicely. It ties it all up real nicely, and it really justifies, this trilogy being the classic that it is. It really stuck the landing, which is a very hard thing to do. I can't stress that enough. Again, I'm going to put it in the A tier, above the other 2. I think it is the best of the trilogy, even if it does kind of rely on the other 2 books for all the setup. You can't hold that against it. It does a great job of taking what worked about the last 2 and just really sticking the landing, really knocking it out of the park with the conclusion. So, The Last Command, it's a great book. So yeah, just being honest. Next, we have The Truce at Bakura by Kathy Tyers. This was a pretty fun book. It does have its flaws, which I'll talk about. First, let's talk about the good stuff. It being immediately after Return of the Jedi makes it very satisfying to read. I think it does a great job of almost serving as an epilogue to that movie. We have Luke still dealing with seizures and stuff from the Emperor's Force Lightning. I really like that. Kathy Tyers put that in there. It definitely, it adds weight to that scene. Anakin, Vader, visits Leia as a Force ghost in a not so well written scene. I don't really like that scene too much. Vader is almost guilt tripping Leia into forgiving him. He's like, Luke forgave me very easily. Why can't you? I don't like the way the scene is written, but it is obviously not. It's a great scene, and it's something that we don't get enough of in Legends. So yeah, and then we got cleanup after the Battle of Endor. And we get Wedge in here, and it's just a very 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 cool epilogue to Return of the Jedi, and I really like the whole Rebel and Imperial truce thing right after the Battle of Endor. That's a really cool storyline to do, so I really liked that. Good characterization in this book as well, specifically with Luke. I mean, he is a kind of a simp in this book. He's, you could call him an incel, but he is, I do really like him in this book. He's got some cool, like, Force stuff, but, yeah, he's just a cool character in this book. The new characters are decent as well. Dev Sabwara, who's kind of a teen that is, I don't know if he's mind-controlled by the Searook, I can't really remember, but he works for them, and he's a cool character. And Gairiel Captason, who's Luke's love interest. She's honestly a really cool character, and one of my favorite love interests for Luke, after Mara Jade. So, yeah. But then, of course, I said there were some flaws. First off, the writing in this book is very stale. Kathy Tyers' style is very stale and sometimes hard to follow. Her sense of geography is very bad. There's a part in the beginning of this book where Wedge is trying to keep this messenger ship from, like, self-destructing. Didn't really know what was going on there, just because of the way it was written. And yeah, overall, her scenes lack a sense of energy, a sense of urgency that really makes this book not like a slog to read or anything, but it is pretty stale at times, so yeah. And then the middle act is very boring. It's basically just, Han and Leia dressing up in some political robes and stuff and going to these dinner parties to discuss politics with the Imperials, and Luke goes to visit Gairiel at her apartment, and they have dinner, and they talk about politics and ethics and stuff, and yeah. And then the Searook as a villain, it could have been really cool. There's a lot of potential with them. They could have been very creepy. Their entekment thing could have been very scary. It is sometimes, but overall, I think they were just portrayed in a very goofy light, so that's kind of a shame. Overall, it's a fun book. Over time, I've definitely my opinion on it has definitely improved as well. So I'll put it in the B tier below the Starcave of ThonBoka. I did really enjoy it. And some stuff of it comes back later on in the Corellian trilogy and apparently in New Jedi Order. So it's satisfying. Overall, fun book. Let's move on to The Heart of the Jedi, a very similar book to The Truce of Bakura. Supposed to come out around the same time. It actually got replaced by The Truce at Bakura. The main problem with this book for me is that it's honestly pretty forgettable, but I think that's due to the fact that when I was reading it, I subconsciously knew that it's, not canon to Legends. It was canceled, so I don't know, my brain kind of subconsciously was like, I don't really need to remember this because none of this is going to come back later, since this is not an official part of the continuity. So I think that's why I forgot a lot about it, but either way, it is I forgot a lot about it, so I can't really say much on it. I do remember Luke is great in this book. His plotline about, not really knowing his place in the galaxy was great. He goes back to Tatooine, and that was fun. The side plots were kind of boring, with Han and Leia. I don't really remember what was going on there. The villains were boring. The only thing I do remember about the Han stuff that I remember liking was the Imperials kind of sabotaged 3PO, and he was acting very sassy towards Han, talking back. He even attacks Han at one point. I really liked 3PO in this book. The problem with this book, other than that it's forgettable, there's these two characters, the Imperial Admiral, whose name is Tharkus. He has these two shapeshifters. I don't remember what their names are, but they just ruined a lot of this book for me because a lot of characters that I really liked, or at least that I thought really worked in the story and in the plot, were just revealed to be shapeshifters at the end. For example, there's a character that Luke meets along the way on his journey named Captain Thatch. He's an Ewok. He's a ship captain. Really cool character. Really fun character. I would have loved to have seen more of him, but it turns out he was just the shapeshifter all along. He doesn't actually exist, which really sucked because I really liked his character. But overall, it's a fun book. I'll put it in the B tier just because what I really liked about it, I really liked. I'll put it below Truce at Bakura. I think it is. Truce at Bakura is a better written book. I think it handles the the franchise a lot better. It feels more Star Wars-y. This book feels almost like it's kind of amateurish in its writing, and Truce Bakura feels a little bit more like integrated into the Star Wars lore. I don't know how to describe it, but if you've read both books, maybe you'll know what I mean. But overall, I still liked this book. Next, we have Tales of the Jedi by Tom Veitch and Kevin J. Anderson. This is all of the arcs in a single entry. I loved this this series. I really loved the aesthetic, the designs, the artwork, just the overall aesthetic. It's kind of steampunk and old-fashioned. I definitely prefer it over the KOTOR aesthetic. This is supposed to be 4,000 years before the original, or the saga as a whole, so it's like you should be able to notice a distinct visual difference between the designs in this and in that. KOTOR looks pretty much identical to the saga in terms of technological advancement, whereas this is very clearly pretty ancient stuff compared to the saga, so I loved that. The stories and the characters were great. I loved the stories of Eula Keldroma and Exar Kun and Nomi Sunrider and all these characters. Very grand storytelling. I really enjoyed it. Very grand stories between the Sith and the Jedi. Great stuff. Overall, in its presentation, it's very 90s. It's very campy and cheesy and corny, and I love it. So I'll put it in the A tier. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. It's a staple. It's very classic, and I recommend anybody should read it. I'll put it below Dark Force Rising. I just don't think it is as good as the Thrawn trilogy, but it is, of course, good enough to be in the A tier, so I really enjoyed it. Next, we have the Jedi Academy trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson. Very controversial. The first book is Jedi Search, easily the best book of the trilogy, without a doubt. The storylines here were a lot of fun. I really liked Luke's search for Jedi candidates. I really liked Han and Chewie's stuff on Kessel. All the Mos stuff was fun. Lando's blob race was really weird. Leia's political stuff was kind of boring at times. But overall, the book was very solid. My only big issue is that Luke didn't do enough Jedi searching. Considering that's the title of the book, there should have been more Jedi searching, but there wasn't. So, yeah, the Han and Chewie stuff was kind of the main storyline, which I enjoyed, but I feel like Luke should have taken the center stage in this one, and he didn't. So, yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. I'll put it in the B tier above Starcave of ThonBoka. I really enjoyed this book. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was pretty good in terms of characterization and plot lines and writing, but unfortunately, the trilogy really drops off after this. Dark Apprentice. Some really cool ideas in here. Bringing in Exar Kun from Tales of the Jedi was a very awesome connection. I really enjoyed how they used his character as, a spirit haunting the Jedi Praxium. Really loved that. Putting the Jedi Praxium on Yavin 4 was a brilliant idea, really great idea, really great location for it. Just perfect for Luke's Jedi Order. The problem with this book is the first one. I have two major problems. The first one is that the characters are just absolutely retarded. Luke is just a horrible teacher. Right under his nose, Gantoris is killed, and Kip Duron is turned to the dark side, and Luke doesn't really care. All he really has to say to his students is, "Beware the dark side." He really just doesn't care that one of his students literally turned to ash and bones under it was his responsibility to teach him, protect him. He's just not a good teacher. Han is a horrible husband. He's about to go rescue Leia, and then Lando offers to play sabacc with him, and he just ditches Leia to go play sabacc. Dala is an incompetent villain. I believe this is the book where she loses like 3 Star Destroyers or something like that. Not a good villain at all. There was way too many plot lines in this book. That's my second problem. There's, Luke's stuff with Exar Kun at the academy and all his students. Leia and Akbar, they crash into some cathedral on some planet. Dala, she has her whole crusade, attacking civilians on certain planets and stuff and all that. Wedge and Quizux have a whole honeymoon thing. They're not even married. They have a whole romance thing. The twins have a whole storyline in the underworld, and there's just way too much stuff going on. You know, we have Ambassador Fergan doing some evil machinations behind the scenes. Just way too much stuff going on. A lot of it just doesn't lead anywhere. The twins stuff doesn't do anything. It doesn't lead anywhere. Same with Wedge and Quizuk's stuff. Yeah, just a waste of time. And the book overall is just poorly written. So I'll put it in the D tier. I'll put it below Mind's Eye. I think Mind's Eye is still kind of a fun adventure story. It doesn't have any huge writing errors. It's just very dated, and it's not very well written. This one, horribly written. Yeah, nothing much else to say. And then we have Champions of the Force, the third and final book. It's got the same exact issues as Dark Apprentice. Bad characters, horrible characters. You know, they're just retarded the way they act. And a lot of filler storylines. The problem with this book, the reason it's my least favorite, and the reason I think it is significantly weaker than Dark Apprentice, is that it's so extremely boring. All of the interesting stuff between Exar Kun and Luke and the Jedi students on Yavin 4, really cool stuff with Luke's spirit and body being, you know, separated and all that. Really, really awesome stuff. All the students coming together to defeat Exar Kun. All of that stuff is great, but it's all resolved in the first third of this book. And the rest of this book is all about the Maw installation, all about the Sun Crusher and Dala and all that, and it's really, really boring. We spend multiple chapters following, like, Wedge and Chewie as they're, you know, trying to blow up the Maw installation. We spend multiple chapters with, like, the scientists behind the Death Star prototype. It's so dumb. Such a waste of time, and really, really boring. So I'm going to put this book in the the E tier, not the B tier, the E tier. I'll put it above Empire's End, just because Empire's End is way too rushed, way too boring, way too poorly written. This one, it's kind of got some redeeming qualities that put it above Empire's End, but again, I mean, it's in the E tier. What else can I say? It's not good. So yeah, let's move on to the Courtship of Princess Leia. This book was a lot of fun at times, and other times it was not a lot of fun. The love triangle is kind of the main aspect of this book between Han, Leia, and Isolde, and it did not land for me. All three characters were just so unlikable. Han, like, kidnaps Leia. Leia is, like, unusually cold to Han just out of nowhere, and she's, you know, actually gonna marry Isolde just because, you know, it'd be beneficial to the New Republic. And then Isolde, I mean, he's not as bad as Han, but he's still got that whole stupid masculinity thing where he's, you know, got a whole rivalry going on. It's very immature. I just don't like it at all, and I was not invested in their love triangle because I just was not rooting for anybody. So, yeah. The book just doesn't get interesting until they go to Dathomir as well. The first, I don't know if it's the first third. I'd say it's maybe about the first fifth, 2/5 of this book is all about, you know, the Hapens coming to Coruscant. There's a lot of political drama with that, and Han Solo wins Dathomir and everything. It's just boring. When they get to Dathomir, it's really cool. There's a lot of really great world building, a lot of really great stuff with, like, Luke using the Force and the Night Sisters and all that. It's really great stuff. I really enjoyed it. And I really like the tone of this book. It's very pulpy. It's kind of a romance novel, which we don't really get in the EU very often. So really unique in that respect. The villains in this book are very underutilized. That's another one of my big flaws. Zinj does not show up at all. He has very little page time. Luckily, we get him in the Wraith Squadron books, and he's good in those, but not in this. And then Gethzerian, the head Night Sister, she's a cool concept, and her design in, like, Star Wars Galaxies is great, but she does not do much in this book. I mean, she, like, hurts Luke a lot. If I remember correctly, she, like, puts him in a coma for a little bit or something, or, like, you know, gives him an aneurysm or something. I don't remember, but she's very powerful, but then she, like, gets blown up in a ship or something. I don't know. It was disappointing. So overall, it's a very unique book and pretty fun at some points. I'll put it in the B tier just because I really like the world building, really like the tone. So I'll put it in the B tier above Starcave. So yeah, fun book and overhated by some people for sure. Speaking of overhated, we have The Crystal Star. This book is extremely overhated. People saying this is the worst book in the EU and it's just horrible. I don't understand. It is not that bad. It's definitely got some issues and definitely very weird and very boring at times, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, being boring is a bad thing, but being weird, again, I said with the Lando stuff, I love weird. Yeah, it's weird. Who cares? The Solo twins get some cool development. They have a fun plot line, getting kidnapped by Heir, and they're on his, like, I forgot what they call it, but his, like, fake little world that he created or something. I don't remember. The side plots kind of suck. You know, Leia's and Chewie's was boring with them, like, on a refugee ship or something. I don't really remember. And then Luke and Han's plotline was kind of boring, I guess, with them on the space station or whatever. Like, I don't remember what it was called. With Waru, Luke's characterization sucked. Han was very boring. He didn't do anything. He didn't really have any one-liners or anything. Overall, the book is just kind of boring. That's just my biggest flaw with it. But again, the Solo twins get good development. Their plotline is really interesting. Waru, I actually think he's done pretty well. I like the way the people respond to him. The people around him respond or react to him more so. I think that really gives him this eerie and sort of mysterious feeling to him. I don't know. I'll put it in the C tier. I do not think it's an F tier, an E tier, or anything like that. I'll put it in the C tier. I'll put it below the Marvel Comics. I think objectively they're about the same. The Marvel Comics obviously being very dated, but I did like the Marvel Comics more. The Crystal Star, just very overhated. It's not a bad book by any means. Boring, yes, but not bad. Then we got the Corellian trilogy. A lot of these 3 books blend together, so I won't be talking too much into specifics because I don't remember too much about what happens in each book individually. The first book is Ambush at Corellia. I remember really liking this book before they get to Corellia. I like all this stuff on Corellia, but before they get to Corellia, I remember the writing being like very good for some reason. I don't know why, but I just really enjoyed it. There's some fun politics, some fun drama involving the Corellian crisis, all the lead up to that. Overall, I just say these first few books of the trilogy are very uneventful. There's a lack of a clear main villain. Nothing really happens. The plot is incomplete. You know, we get some mysteries, some questions that are never answered until the very end. Luke and Lando's plot was very dumb. It leads to Lando, of course, getting a wife. But other than that, it's very dumb. I don't know. This book was just, it's fine. I'll put it in the C tier. I think it's better than Crystal Star. I'll put it above Crystal Star. But it's, again, very uneventful, and it just blends together with the other books in the trilogy. We have Assault at Selonia next. This is the second book. I forgot to mention these are by Roger McBride Allen. This one is, again, uneventful. Nothing happens, really. Battle of Selonia is what this book is kind of leading up to, and it's very uneventful, so that sucks. It's cool that they brought back some stuff from Truce of Bakura. Bakura as a planet, Gabriel Captison's back. I don't know, a lot of this book is just very uneventful, very forgettable. Again, it blends together with the other 2 books. The only thing I really remember is that Han fights an otter, and then he's crawling through the tunnels with all the Selonians, and stuff like that. Yeah, it's still a decent book. I do think the Corellian trilogy overall is pretty entertaining. It just didn't have to be a trilogy, and the plot is stretched very thin, and it ends up being very uneventful. So, again, C tier. I'm going to put this one below Crystal Star. I think it is the weakest of the trilogy. Again, the middle book being the weakest. Not a surprise there. Then we have Showdown at Centerpoint. My personal favorite of the trilogy, but only because it actually is the most eventful, and we get some questions answered, and the villains start to, be revealed and everything. I don't know, Centerpoint was kind of cool. The Solo twins, they're in the drawl, like, planet repulsor, whatever it's called. They get some cool development, especially Anakin, who has to, like, control the planetary repulsor or whatever. The battle of the Centerpoint station was decent. I really liked Gabriel's death, and what's his name, Admiral Oscillage or whatever. The Bakuran Admiral, his death was really cool. The Sicorian Triad being the villains was kind of a neat twist, but they just didn't even show up. That was really dumb. So, I don't know. Again, pretty uneventful at times, but, you know, at least some stuff happens compared to the last two, so it is my favorite of the trilogy. Unfortunately, it's still a C tier in my opinion. I'll put it above Ambush at Corellia, right above that. Yeah. Overall, it's a decent trilogy, and I'd recommend reading it, just simply for the character development with the Solo twins and Han and stuff, so, yeah. Then we have the Jabba the Hutt comics. I really love Jabba as a character. I think he's very underrated, so I really enjoy that he gets his own series here. These comics are really fun. I really love the art. They're hilariously brutal and just very gory and grotesque. You know, he eats someone at one point. He kills someone with his tail. I think he suffocates somebody by jumping on them. Really, really funny stuff. So, yeah, really enjoyed the comics here. I'm going to put him in the C tier. I mean, again, it's Jabba the Hutt. It's not higher literature. Nothing great, nothing good enough to get it out of the C tier. I'll put it above the Crystal Star. This C tier is really starting to fill up, but what can I say? There's a lot of mediocre stuff. But yeah, the Jabba the Hutt comics, pretty fun. Just nothing huge. So, yeah. Alright, so now let's move on to the things that I've never actually ranked on a tier list. Starting with Children of the Jedi. This book is... it's horrible. It's horrible in pretty much every way. Plot-wise, it is very nonsensical. For example, at the beginning of the book, all the characters are on Ithor when they're approached by a friend of Han's. His name is Drub McCum. He's gone a little crazy, and he's, you know, rambling on about the Children of the Jedi, this place called Plett's Well. Somehow, Luke just happened to bring along the two Jedi who know exactly what Plett's Well is, that being Cray Mingla and Nikos Mar. Stuff like that throughout the entire book, just weird conveniences and contrivances. Yeah, it's not a good book in terms of plot. It's also very boring. The Eye of Palpatine stuff is really boring. It's a slog to get through. It's way too long. The Roganda Ismaran plotline with her and Eric, it doesn't go anywhere. It's really boring. It's super forgettable. And yeah, overall, just a boring book. And then, of course, there's everything to do with Callista. She is not a good character. She's a dead Jedi who uploaded her consciousness into the Eye of Palpatine's computer, and she basically communicates with Luke through that, until Luke's student Cray Mingla dies, and Callista decides to jump into her body, and take her body, and use it as her physical form. It's just fucked up. Like, what kind of story is this? It makes no sense. I don't know why Barbara Hamley wrote it the way she did. Other than that, I just don't really want to talk about this book anymore. It's really atrocious in almost every possible way. Yeah, I'm going to put it in the F tier below Jedi Prince. It's just, there's really no redeeming qualities. The only redeeming quality I can really think of is that the whole theme about sentience versus artificial intelligence, you know, what's the difference? Where's that line drawn? That was kind of cool. But unfortunately, it was fumbled at the end with the death of the fake Nikos Mar, the droid, who just dies because he's a droid and his life apparently doesn't matter. I don't know. It's just... this book is so bad. Let's move on to Darksaber by Kevin J. Anderson. This book is a lot better than Children of the Jedi. I don't know if that's just because Kevin J. Anderson wrote it, or... mainly it's because I feel like there are a lot of really fun moments in this book. Overall, I'd say it is very mediocre. It'd probably be a D tier or even maybe an E tier, but there were a lot of really fun moments in this book. First, we had Dorsk 81, his sacrifice on Yavin, when Daala's fleet shows up, basically Dorsk 81, with the help of other Jedi, basically just does a huge force push that pushes her fleet like light years away. It's very ridiculous when you think about it, but honestly, I don't mind. I thought it was a really awesome moment. And yeah, I really enjoyed that moment. Crix Madine's death was cool. How he's about to be rescued and then he dies. It was really cool seeing a movie character die in a book. This was the first time I think that had happened. We had Daala trying to reunify the Empire, and then she eventually just kills all the warlords and becomes the sole survivor. That was really awesome. Everything on Hoth to do with the Wampas, that whole horror element was really fun. All the flashbacks with, I forgot his name, but he was the engineer of the Death Star. We got a lot of flashbacks of him, his time with Palpatine killing him, reviving him. I don't remember his name, but that was really cool. But yeah, overall, it's a very mediocre book. Durga the Hutt, we got more super weapons in the form of the Darksaber project, just, stupid stuff like that. But yeah, I'm going to put it at the bottom of the C tier, below Han Solo's Revenge. If it weren't for those handful of really awesome moments, this book would definitely be 1 or even 2 tiers lower, but yeah. Next, we have Planet of Twilight by Barbara Hambly. This is the third and final Callista book in the unofficial Callista trilogy. This one's a lot better than Children of the Jedi. It's definitely Barbara Hambly's better of the two, mainly because there's very little Callista in this book. She shows up in maybe like 2 scenes. Overall, there's some cool stuff in this book. Mainly the plot lines are really weird with the Death Seed Plague and the beetles, those Drokes, I think they're called. There's a Beldorion the Hutt. He's a Jedi Hutt. That was really weird and really cool. A lot of Jedi Leia. She even has a lightsaber duel with Beldorion. I liked Luke's plotline. It felt almost like Dune. He's kind of just like wandering through the desert with, people. It's still not a good book. It's still one of my least favorite books of Legends, but it's better than Children of the Jedi. That's why I'm focusing on the positives. Yeah, it is still really, really boring. Again, the plotlines are really weird and out there. Yeah, I'm going to put it in the E tier. I'll put it above Empire's End. I think it's not nearly as offensive as Empire's End. Yeah, overall, it's just very weird. And better than Children of the Jedi is the best thing I can say about it. Next, let's move on to Young Jedi Knights, which I've grouped into 3 different entries. I've split it into all 3 of its different storylines. So, the first one we have is The Rise of the Shadow Academy. This is the first 6 books of the series. It's Heirs of the Force, Shadow Academy, The Lost Ones, Lightsabers, Darkest Night, and Jedi Under Siege. Deals with the Shadow Academy, of course, being the villains. I really liked that storyline, the whole Jedi Academy versus the Shadow Academy. I really loved the characters in this. Jason, Jaina, Tenelka, Lobaka. Their introduction was really fun. Their development was great. Brachus and Tamith Kai are decent villains. Luke gets a lot of really awesome moments in this series. Yeah, overall, I just really enjoyed this this arc. It has great energy, great characters. The plot is fun. I am going to put it in the B tier. I'll put it... I'm actually going to put it above Jedi Search. I don't think it's as good as the Han Solo books. I'll give it to the Han Solo books just because, personally, I prefer adult novels. Just because I can take them a little bit more seriously, but I still loved the Young Jedi Knights series and this arc specifically. So yeah, let's move on to the second arc, titled The Fall of the Diversity Alliance. This one's still pretty fun. It's definitely weaker than the last one. The Diversity Alliance is a lot a weaker storyline, less interesting threat than the Shadow Academy. The plot is less interesting. We still got good characters with the main 4, as well as Zek is in this. We also had Raynar Thol, who took a not center stage, but definitely had a bigger role here. He was cool. We had some fun cameos all around. A bunch of bounty hunters showed up. IG-88, Dengar, Boba Fett. Lusa returned from the Crystal Star. yeah, I mean, it's just less interesting than the first arc, but it is still very enjoyable in my opinion. So I'm going to put it in the C tier. I'll put it above Mindharp of Sharu, putting it at the top of the C tier. Yeah, it's still a lot of fun. So, yeah. Then we have the third and the final book, or third and final arc in the series. We have Under Black Sun, which consists of 3 books. I forgot to name the last 5 of the Diversity Alliance arc. That was Shards of Alderaan, Diversity Alliance, Delusions of Grandeur, Jedi Bounty, and the Emperor's Plague. So, yeah. These 3, Under Black Sun, these 3 are, what are they? Return to Ord Mantell, Trouble on Cloud City, and Crisis at Crystal Reef. Those are the 3. This is my least favorite arc of the series. I think it's easily the weakest. The storyline does not progress enough, where there's not enough stuff going on with Black Sun. A lot of it deals with Anya Galandro, which it's cool that they brought elements back from the Han Solo adventures, with Galandro's daughter now being a key player of the series, but she overshadows the main characters, and they get like no development, and yeah, it's not good. That's my main 2 issues with this. There's barely any character development for our main 4, Jacen, Jaina, Tenel Ka, Lobaka, and there's barely any plot progression until I'd say about the second and the third book. And that's a real problem because this one's only 3 books long. Yeah, overall, that's really all I gotta say. It's my least favorite arc. I'll put it in the D tier. I don't think it's that bad. I'll put it below Splinter of the Mind's Eye. I just feel like that book is a little bit more fun. So yeah, Under Black Sun, not too strong of an arc, but it's not absolutely horrible. Overall, Young Jedi Knights was a very fun series. Next, we have the 4 or 5 issue, I think it's 4 issue comic run called River of Chaos. This one is very pointless. It's just a story about a planet where the Empire is, oppressive, and the people rise up and form their own rebellion, and Leia shows up, and there's nothing special. The characters here are uninteresting. The plot is forgettable. The art is boring. And this is, like, never referenced again. So, yeah. I don't know. I'm going to put it in the E tier. I'll put it above Empire's End. I still think Empire's End is more offensive and just more disappointing. This one, it's not good, but it's not like... You're not going to read it and think that's the worst thing I've ever read. It's not, like, particularly horribly written. It's just... It's so bland, and it doesn't need to exist. It just felt like they made a comic series, slapped the name Star Wars on it because, makes them some quick money. Next, we have Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, a bunch of short stories about the characters from the background of the Cantina scene. I really enjoyed this book. It's a very fun concept. I thought it was done pretty well, the way that the stories connected. There were some really fun stories. I really liked the one about the Stormtrooper. The Wolfman had a great one, very trippy one. Greedo's one was great, very just recontextualized his character and made him really sympathetic, honestly. There was one about a moisture farmer that was great. So yeah, there's some great stories in here. There's some mediocre and boring ones as well. But yeah, they overall tie together real nicely. And I really like the concept. I think it's a really fun idea for a book. I'm going to put it in the B tier. I'll put it at the bottom of the B tier, below Heart of the Jedi. Just because it is a very inconsistent, like the Marvel comics, like I said with that one, every good issue has a bad issue to, balance it out. Whereas in this case, I'd say every 2 good stories, there's a boring one. So, yeah. Overall, really, really fun idea for a book and executed fairly well. Next, we have a very similar book. This is Tales from Jabba's Palace. Instead of background characters from the Cantina scene, this is background characters from, of course, Jabba's Palace. This one is weaker, in my opinion. First of all, Jabba's Palace, there's a lot less room for variety with the stories. Anybody could show up in Mos Eisley Cantina, but Jabba's Palace, almost all the people in there are going to be criminals and bounty hunters and scoundrels, and there's a lot less variety. Again, there are some great stories. Mara Jade's was really fun. Boba Fett's, him and the Sarlacc, was fantastic. The Rancor Keepers was great. The Bib Fortuna's one was great. There was a great one about a Gamorrean guard. But yeah, just like the Mos Eisley one, there's great stories and there's some boring and mediocre ones too. There's a lot more boring ones this time around, I think. And the way that these tie together, and there's the overarching plot, it's a lot less interesting this time around. With the murder mystery, I don't know. It's just not as good as the Mos Eisley book, but it is still decent. I'll put it in the C tier. I'm actually going to put it below the Jabba comics, interestingly enough, because those ones were more fun, I guess. Yeah, of course, this is better than Crystal Star, but yeah, I don't know. Tales from Jabba's Palace, I just didn't find it as interesting as the Mos Eisley Cantina book, so yeah, unfortunately, gets a C tier, but that's not bad. Junior Jedi Knights is next, but by both Nancy Richardson and Rebecca Moesta. I really enjoyed this series. It's not as good as Young Jedi Knights. Of course, it follows Anakin and Tahiri and Ikrit. All three of those characters are really fun. I really like the first three books, the Golden Globe trilogy, which consists of the Golden Globe, Lyrics World, and Promises. I really liked that storyline. A lot of great character development with Anakin and Tahiri, and Golden Globe stuff was pretty fun, actually really creepy at times too. The problem I have with this series is the 4th, 5th, and 6th books, the second trilogy, which I believe, don't quote me on it, I believe it was Rebecca Moesta's trilogy, which consisted of Anakin's Quest, Vader's Fortress, Kenobi's Blade. Those three were a lot less interesting, a lot less character development. Ulder, who kind of joins their crew, he's not a good character. I really don't like him. The villain was less interesting. What's his name? Like the wizard, I don't remember what his name is, but he wasn't very interesting. Yeah, I didn't like the second trilogy as much, but overall the series is pretty good. I'd put it in the C tier. I'll put it below the Mindharp of Sharu. I thought it was fun. It's very expensive. It's very hard to find for cheap, so personally, I wouldn't recommend buying it for the $100+ that it is to get. I bought it because I'm a completionist and I have to have every book on my shelf, but if you aren't like that, I wouldn't recommend buying this. It's not essential. If you can find a copy online, like a PDF or something, go for it. But yeah, it's fun though. Let's move on to the Boba Fett comics. We have Boba Fett, Death, Lies, and Treachery first. These are the first three Boba Fett comics from the 90s. I forgot who wrote these, but Cam Kennedy did the art and everything, so it looks great. I don't really like Boba Fett's portrayal here. He's just kind of boring, and he kind of walks around, says nothing. And when he does say something, it's in weird, childish sentences. I don't know. His portrayal in here is kind of... They're trying too hard to make him mysterious and badass and everything, so, yeah. The storylines were kind of forgettable with, I forgot, the other bounty hunter that is hunting him, that, monster thing, that was pretty forgettable. Overall, it's just these three comics. They're just forgettable. That's really all I have to say about them. I'll put it in the C tier below Darksaber, putting it right at the bottom of the C tier, of course. It was decent. I like Boba Fett, but yeah. Next, we have Enemy of the Empire. This is the other Boba Fett story, the other Boba Fett series that I read. I read a lot of one-shots, but I'm not putting them on here. Enemy of the Empire, though, was very disappointing. Based on the cover and based on just the story that's being marketed, you'd think that it's all about Boba Fett and Vader and their first meeting and their fight, but that's it's very few and far between their moments. And when they are, together, Vader's portrayal is a little bit weird, and their fight was underwhelming. So, yeah, too much of this series was focused on irrelevant, boring stuff. There was a whole storyline about this, queen. She's like an oracle. She can see the future, but she, her head gets, she gets decapitated, and she can still, prophesies the future and everyone's after her. It's dumb. Yeah, it's just not a fun story, unfortunately. So, I'm gonna put it in the D tier. I'm gonna put it below Dark Empire 2. Very disappointing. Nothing interesting goes on here. Boba Fett and Vader's fight just falls flat. So, yeah. Next, we have the Rogue Squadron comics, the X-Wing Rogue Squadron comics. Really, really fun comics. I really enjoyed the art. I really enjoyed the characters, sometimes even more than the book characters from the Rogue Squadron books. Really fun stories. I really love Baron Fell. He's a character who takes center stage later on in the series. He's kind of this Imperial ace pilot that defects to the Rebellion. Really cool character. Overall, yeah, I just really enjoyed this series. It's just a bunch of adventures that Rogue Squadron goes on. There's nothing huge, nothing special here, but I'll put it in the B tier. I'll put it below Starcave of ThonBoka, above Truce of Bakura. I just had a lot of fun with it. I really like the X-Wing characters, and this was just some fun adventures with them, so yeah. Let's jump right into the X-Wing series, the book series. First, we have X-Wing Rogue Squadron. Really, really fun start to the series. Really loved the characters. Corrin is a great protagonist. There's great squadron camaraderie. Like, Corrin has a rivalry with Bror Jace. That's really fun. His conversations with Lu Jane Forge and everything, you know, with the pilots and the hangars, the barracks, the briefing rooms, everything, the mess hall. There's a lot of scenes like that are just really fun. Really like the plot in this one, with the battles of Borleas at the end, setting up, of course, the Coruscant campaign. That was just really fun. Really liked those battles. First one they lost, the second one they went back and won. Yeah, it's just a really, really fun, simplistic start to the series. So I'll put it in the B tier, above Lost Legacy, putting it top of the B tier. It's definitely, like, you know, one of my favorite books that I've ever read up to this point. So yeah, I'm happy with that placement. So yeah. Let's move on to book 2. This is Wedge's Gamble. This is one of my least favorite books of the series. It's very poorly done, in my opinion. Conceptually, it's really cool. They go to Coruscant. They sneak onto Coruscant. They're sabotaging the Empire's defenses. They're gathering intel on the Empire's, Coruscant operations until the New Republic fleet can come in and take over the planet. But unfortunately, everything on Coruscant was just so boring. Literally, like, it's the same thing for, like, 200 plus pages. Like, Rogue Squadron's going around sabotaging a warehouse, sabotaging some piece of, some server or something. I don't know. It's dumb. Writing is really bad. For example, there's a speeder chase between Corrin and some Black Sun operatives where Corrin, like, shoots one of the speeders down. It crashes into an apartment that just so happens to be the apartment where Wedge and Mirax are at and everybody else. Ayala and all them. And then he crashes his own speeder right into the rest of Rogue Squadron, who are in a dogfight with, or a firefight with stormtroopers. It's dumb. And then the final battle at the end of this book was, the battle for Coruscant. The New Republic comes in to take the planet from the Empire. Really underwhelming. It lasted, like, not long at all. There was a few paragraphs of, like, capital ships broadsiding. There was a few paragraphs of dogfighting in the surface between Corrin and some TIE fighters, but other than that, a really boring book, which sucks, because I thought it would be one of the better books of the series. So I'm going to put it in the D tier below Dark Empire 2. I just think it is so disappointing. There was a lot of potential, and it never lived up to that potential. So yeah, Wedge's Gamble is in the D tier, unfortunately. Next, we have the Kratos Trap, a bit uneventful. Personally, I think there's a little bit too little action, but the storylines in this book are really awesome. I really love Tycho's trial, his court case. I like Corrin in the Lusankia trying to escape. I like all the Kratos virus setup and stuff. That's all really fun. The thing that really makes this book stand out for me is the finale. The third act, the ending, where Corrin escapes the Lusankya. He shows up at the Tycho court case because, of course, Tycho is being convicted of murdering Corran. But Corran comes back and basically acquits Tycho of his charges, and it's really awesome. And then, of course, the Lusankya breaks out of the surface of Coruscant. That was really awesome. Yeah, it's just a really fun book. And then Rogue Squadron resigns at the end, setting up the next book. I'll put this one in the B tier, below Jedi Search, but above Kratos Trap, or above Courtship of Princess Leia. Really enjoyed it. It's a little bit underrated. You know, a lot of the times I see people ranking this among their least favorite of the series. It's not one of my favorites, but it is pretty good. It's definitely better than the last book, in my opinion. So, yeah. Next we have book 4, which is the Bacta War. This book has some decent stuff in it. Corran and Mirax's relationship is very center stage in this one. We get Booster Tarek. Him and Talon Card spend a lot of this book, you know, trading information and ships and stuff. Everything to do with the Battle of Thyfera and the Rogues' secret war against Isard was cool. Overall, I'd just say this book is very forgettable. A lot of it, again, due to, you know, Booster Tarek and Talon Card just trading information and stuff. That was, you know, a lot of this book was that. It's just, yeah, it's just a forgettable book, in my opinion. So, I will put it in the C tier. I'll put it below the Marvel comics. I think those are more fun. Yeah. Bacta War. It's not bad. It's not my least favorite of the Rogue Squadron series. But yeah, it is a little forgettable. Next is the Wraith Squadron trilogy. First, of course, starting with Wraith Squadron. I really liked this book. I really loved the characters. Keltainer, Runt, Mindonos, Piggy, Grinder, Face and Ton, Tyria, just so many characters. The whole squadron is just so entertaining, and all the characters are just great. The plot is a little bit lacking with them, like, you know, taking over the Imperial ship, the Nightcaller, and kind of following Zinj around a little bit, which caused the book to be a little bit too long because they kept just doing kind of the same thing with the Nightcaller. It got a little repetitive. I do really like the battles in this book, the space battles. Actually, the atmospheric battles were great, specifically the battles of Folor, which was about, I don't remember, it was either in the middle of the book or kind of near the beginning, and then the Battle of Oseon at the very end. Those two battles were just really unique in terms of, like, strategy, really entertaining to read. So yeah, Wraith Squadron, to me, just the characters make this book very entertaining. So I am going to put it in the B tier. I'll put it underneath Rogue Squadron. I think Rogue Squadron is a little bit better since it still does have interesting characters, but it also has an interesting plot, and it's a little bit more fun, but yeah. Next, we have Iron Fist. This book is fantastic. It's my favorite X-Wing book, and it's one of my favorite Star Wars books ever. Mainly, the characters are just phenomenal, specifically Face and Ton, Face being the main character of this book. Ton's death in this book was just so well written. It's like a friggin' literary masterpiece the way it is. It's so sad. I mean, Ton is a cool character, but he's just an X-Wing pilot. The way that they managed to make just your ordinary, everyday X-Wing pilot's death gut-wrenching is shocking. I shouldn't say they. It was Aaron Alston. Aaron Alston just does a great job with the characters in this book. The plot was pretty good too. You know, it's kind of the same thing as the last book. It gets a little bit repetitive. They steal interceptors. All that was cool. There's a part in this book that I love. It is the part in the book where members of Wraith Squadron basically dress up in disguise as bounty hunters, or as pirates, and they go and visit Zinj on the Iron Fist, and it was just so tense. It was so tense, intense, whatever you want to say. My heart was pounding. You know, there's We got Castan Dawn sneaking around. Nobody knows he's on the Iron Fist. He's discovering all these secret levels where Zinj is experimenting on these aliens. It's really creepy. It's really thrilling. And then they bring his body up to the rest of the Wraiths to test them. And I forgot her name. Dia, I think it was. She just shoots Castan Dawn. She knew he was dead, but at the time, she just shoots him outright, and it was shocking. But that whole sequence was just brilliant. It was so great. So it's my favorite X-Wing book. It's got my favorite moment in the EU, probably, with Ton's death. It's got my favorite EU cover. It looks beautiful with the blue and the yellow and everything. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I'm actually going to put it above Heir to the Empire, below Last Command. I think it is my second favorite book that I've ever read so far in the EU. It's so good. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, but yeah, here we are. Then we have Solo Command, the third and final Wraith Squadron book. This is my least favorite. Personally, I just think it falls flat. Plot-wise, pretty disappointing. There's a plotline about the humans and the aliens kind of being pitted against each other by Zinj, because he uses sleeper agents. He mind controls aliens and has them commit terrorist attacks. That was kind of lazy. It felt like a very cheap kind of knockoff of the Krytos trap, with them trying to, cause a division between humans and aliens in the New Republic. Also, what just completely ruins this book for me, or not ruins it, but definitely holds it back, is the fact that we know Zinj and the Iron Fist and all that survives until Courtship of Princess Leia. A lot of this book is, trying to finally put an end to Zinj, and there's a lot of close calls, but it just doesn't hold any weight because we know that all this stuff survives to Courtship of Princess Leia. Now, that's not anyone's fault. It's not Aaron Alston's fault. It's not Dave Wolverton's fault. It's not Lucasfilm's fault. It's just, the way things worked out. Courtship of Princess Leia came out first, and this book ended up being pretty disappointing and underwhelming. So, yeah, I'll put it in the C tier. I do really like the characters still. Lara is a great character. So, yeah, I'll put it above Bacta War. Again, both books are very forgettable, but I think this one's a little bit better just because it has that, extra really awesome characters, specifically Lara, whereas Bacta War doesn't really have that. Next is Isard's Revenge. This is book 8. Completely unnecessary. This book just doesn't have to exist at all. Bringing Isard back was less risky than bringing Palpatine back, but it didn't pay off the same that Palpatine's return didn't pay off. I just think they didn't do anything interesting enough to justify bringing Isard back. They didn't do anything interesting enough with the Rogues to justify giving them center stage again. The only really character development we get is between Gavin and Asir. I don't know, it just does not need to exist. It's so unnecessary, and it's very boring. So I'm gonna put it in the D tier, below Enemy of the Empire. It's my least favorite X-Wing book. I think probably objectively it's better than Wedge's Gamble, but I really just thought it was boring and didn't need to exist. So, yeah. Next we have Starfighters of Adumar, which is the 9th book, the finale for now of the X-Wing series. I really liked this book. It's very unique. Instead of following an entire squadron, we follow Wedge, Tycho, Wes, and Hobby. They're a great squad, I guess you could say. Really, really fun group of characters. Excuse me. And Adumar as a planet is really great. Wedge is a great character in this. He's trying to find love with Ayala, and he's kind of wondering what honor means, and, Adumar's sense of honor, all the citizens and their ideologies definitely play into that. So, I don't know, it's a very self-contained, isolated, standalone, but very awesome adventure. I'm going to put it in the A tier, below Dark Force Rising. I really enjoyed it. I think it's just really well written. It's the funniest book, in my opinion, in the EU that I've read. It's hilarious, but yeah, overall, it's my second favorite X-Wing book. It's a great book. Next, we have the Black Fleet Crisis. I'm not going to talk too much about these books because they're very similar to the Corellian trilogy because they blend together. But unlike the Corellian trilogy, I actually don't like these books too much. The first one is pretty decent, Before the Storm. I do really like the military sci-fi aspect of it, the way that handles the genre. We got the Black Fleet, we got the Fifth Fleet, we got the Evathans. That whole plotline was fun. Luke's plotline is boring, but Lando's plotline is really cool. Both of them are pretty irrelevant, but I did like Lando's plotline in this book. Leia, her plot is really cool with the Evathans, but she's retarded. I really hate her characterization. She's really dumb in this book. Just making horrible decisions as the president or the chief of state, whatever you want to call her. She deserves to get replaced. So, yeah. I'll put this book in the C tier below the Marvel comics. Those are just more fun. I think, I'll put this book in the C tier above Solo Command and below the Marvel comics. I know a lot of you would not put this above Solo Command and the Bacta War, but I think the whole military aspect to this, the way that it handles that, is very unique, very fun. And putting it below the Marvel comics, I just think the Marvel comics are a lot more fun, so, yeah. Next is Shield of Lies, very uneventful book. It's just, Luke's plotline. Luke just continues to look for the fallen Aussie. Lando's plotline, he just continues to explore the Vagabond. Leia's plotline, she's dealing with, impeachment stuff, the threat of being impeached as president. Nothing really happens in this book, and it's very boring. What doesn't help is the structure. This book is really weirdly structured in that it doesn't go back and forth between the different plot lines. Instead, it splits it up into thirds. The first third of this book is Lando's, I believe. Second third is Luke's, and the third third is Leia's. And I thought that was really weird. It makes the book feel like it's, not even one book. It's like, it feels very disconnected. And yeah, it's just my least favorite of the trilogy, in my opinion. My least favorite in a very mediocre trilogy. It tells you it's very mediocre. I'm going to put it in the D tier, below Dark Empire 2. I think it is the weakest of the trilogy. So, yeah. Then we have Tyrant's Test. This book does a decent job of concluding the trilogy, all the different plot lines. I do think the Evatha are pretty boring in this one. They don't really do anything. They kind of just sit in their little cluster, waiting for the New Republic to strike, and boring villains in this book. Nothing, again, kind of interesting happened. There was no grand finale like there was with the Corellian trilogy. I guess the plotlines kind of converged at the end, which is something I was waiting for, but it did it in a kind of dumb way. Instead of, making them relevant, Luke kind of just learns what's going on with Han, and then he learns what's going on with Lando, and then he goes and takes Lando to the New Republic. It's dumb. It's very uneventful. I'll put it in the D tier along with Shield of Lies, but I'll put it above Dark Empire 2. At least it's not structured weird, and at least it kind of serves as a finale, so yeah. Then we have Shadows of the Empire, the novel. I really enjoyed this book. Very fun, one of the most fun books I've ever read. If you want a book to start the EU with that isn't, a series or you don't need a lot of commitment, this is the book for you. I think it drops you right in between episodes 5 and 6, and it does a great job of connecting the movies. We have really good characters, new and old. The new characters, Dash Rendar, Xizor, Shizor was pretty cool. The old characters were very, very fitting. Their portrayal is very well done. So, yeah. The plot itself, lots of adventure, very, very fun book. Like I said, it does a great job of connecting the films, great connective tissue. It sets up Han's rescue at Jabba's palace. It sets up the rebels having the Death Star plans. It even sets up things like the thermal detonator Leia pulls on Jabba, her whole bush outfit. It even sets up why Chewie's hair looks so bad in Return of the Jedi. It's because he got a flat top in this book. So I'm going to put this one in the B tier below Wraith Squadron. I think it's a really fun book. Steve Perry's writing is very amateurish, very juvenile, but other than that, it's an easy book to kick back and just enjoy reading. So, yeah. Next is the Shadows of the Empire comics. These ones are basically, I don't know if they're an adaptation of the book because I think they came out at the same time, but they definitely follow the same story. It's cool seeing some of the scenes from the book visualized in comic form, but other than that, it doesn't do a great job of adapting the book. It's missing a lot of context with, things that happen in the story. It's a very multifaceted plot, and we don't get all the details, so it's kind of confusing if you don't read the book. Luckily, I read the book before reading the comics, so it made sense, but yeah. The only thing that's really new in this series, in this comic series, is the Boba Fett stuff. We have him about to go to Tatooine, getting jumped by bounty hunters, yada yada yada. It's fun, so I'll put it in the C tier again. All that missing context definitely makes it pretty hard to read if you haven't read the book. I'll put it above Showdown at Centerpoint, but below Bacta War. It is Shadows of the Empire, so I think it's fun. Next is Shadows of the Empire Evolution, the five-part comic book issue that served as an epilogue to the first book and comic. So, yeah, or not necessarily an epilogue, I'd say. It's more of a sequel, but I don't know why they decided to make Guri the main character. She's interesting, but not main character material, in my opinion. I think it should have been Dash Rendar. We know he's alive, and he made a great protagonist in the game, so, yeah. Evolution overall, for what it is, it's fine. The art is decent. I think it's better than the Shadows of the Empire comics, because at least it's an original story. But again, Guri shouldn't be the main character, and, yeah. I'll put it immediately above the Shadows of the Empire comics. I think they're very close in quality. It's just that this one is, again, an original story, so I'll give it the win. But anyways, that is our tier list. That is every single thing that I have read and reviewed on the channel, every book, every comic, ranked from worst to best on a tier list. Hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for my next video, which will be returning to Journey into Legends. I'll be updating this tier list after episode 75, which is a ways away. So, yeah, won't be seeing this for a while. So, yeah, overall, very fun video. I had a lot of fun making it, so I'm excited to get back to it. Anyways, see ya.